He told his family. He told his friends. He looked the people he trusted most in the eye and said the words out loud. Words that no man should ever have to say about the woman he
Derek,
married,
what are you
the woman
talking about?
sleeping beside him,
It is
the
already
woman
too
who
late.
kissed his children goodnight. He said, "If I die, look at my wife." And then he went home. And he stayed. And 17 days later, he was dead. His name was Derek Mitchell. He was 39 years old. He had 3 sons who needed him, a business he had built with his bare hands, and a marriage he had already decided he could not leave, not because he wasn't afraid, but because leaving meant losing daily access to those 3 boys. And Derek Mitchell was the kind of father who would walk through fire before he let that happen. So instead of walking out, he stayed. And the woman he stayed for, the woman he had built a life with, the woman who called herself his wife, had already, weeks before he died, taken out 4 separate life insurance policies on his life. Policies worth nearly $2 million. Policies he never signed for, never agreed to, and never even knew existed. She had also, by that point, sent a woman she employed to a gas station parking lot in Draper, Utah, to buy enough fentanyl from a street dealer to kill a man 5 times over. Not once, twice. She had tried on Valentine's Day, and she had failed. And so she tried again. And on the night of March 3, 2022, in the bedroom of their mountain home in Cedar Ridge, Utah, with 3 small boys asleep down the hall, she finished what she started. Derek Mitchell never woke up. Here is what makes this story different from every other case you have ever heard. Here is the detail that will stay with you. In the year after Derek died, while investigators were quietly building a murder case, while phone records and pill receipts and deleted search histories were being pulled together piece by piece, his wife sat down and wrote a children's book, a picture book, about a little boy who loses his father and wonders if his dad can still see him. She published it. She went on morning television and promoted it with tears in her eyes. She talked about grief and healing and how much she wanted her sons to feel their father's love even from beyond. And the 3 boys she claimed to have written that book for, those same 3 boys who had just lost their father, would later stand before a judge and say they did not feel safe as long as their mother might one day be free. This is that story, and you need to hear every single word of it. Before we go any further, before we follow this story all the way to a courtroom in Park City, Utah, where a jury would sit for 3 weeks and deliberate for just 3 hours, let us stop here for a moment and ask you 3 questions. Because these are the questions that haunted this case from the very beginning. The first question is this: how does a man know his wife is trying to kill him and stay anyway? Derek Mitchell told his family. He told his friends. He called people he trusted and said the words out loud. He said, "If I die, look at Karen." And then he went home. And he stayed. So why? Why does a man who suspects his wife of murder still sit down at the dinner table with her, still sleep beside her, still drink the cocktail she hands him at the end of the night? The answer to that question will break your heart. The second question: how does a woman plan a murder while simultaneously planning to profit from the grief? How does she buy the pills, forge the documents, rack up $2 million in secret debt, and then, after he is gone, sit down and write a children's book about loss? A children's book about a boy who misses his father, published under her own name, promoted on morning television, while investigators were already closing in. And the third question, the one that will stay with you long after this video ends: who are we, really, to the people who say they love us? Because if Derek Mitchell, a good man, a hardworking man, a man with 3 sons who needed him, could be betrayed this completely by the person who shared his bed, his home, his name, and his life, then what does that say about the nature of trust? What does it say about how well any of us truly knows the person sleeping beside us? Stay with us, because the answers are worse than you think. Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. To understand what happened in that bedroom in Cedar Ridge, Utah, on the night of March 3, 2022, you have to go back. You have to go back to where Derek and Karen Mitchell began, because all great tragedies begin somewhere ordinary. They begin with 2 people who meet under ordinary circumstances, who fall in love in the ordinary way, who make ordinary promises that they fully intend to keep. And then something shifts. Slowly, quietly, the way a crack spreads through concrete, invisible at first, until the whole thing gives way. Derek Mitchell grew up in a working-class family in a small Utah town where ambition was not just admired, it was expected. His father worked in construction. His uncles built things with their hands. And Derek, from the time he was a teenager helping pour concrete on weekends, understood something that most people only figure out in middle age, that the things you build yourself are the only things that truly belong to you. By the time he was in his late 20s, Derek had started his own stone masonry business. He contracted with builders, developers, and private clients across the mountain region. He was not a flashy man. He drove trucks, not sports cars. He wore work boots, not loafers. But he was successful, genuinely, quietly successful, and the people around him knew it. Friends who knew Derek in those years describe him in ways that are almost painfully consistent. Dependable, generous, the kind of man who would show up when you called, no questions asked, and still be there 2 hours later making sure everything was handled. One friend said that Derek Mitchell was the kind of person who made you feel like the most important thing in any room, not because he was performing it, but because he genuinely meant it. He coached Little League. He fixed neighbors' fences. He was not a complicated man. He wanted a family. He wanted to work hard. He wanted to build something that would last. Karen Mitchell, or Karen Dalton as she was known before they married, entered his world like a weather system. She was energetic, ambitious, and impossible to ignore. Where Derek was steady, Karen was electric. She talked about big plans, real estate investments, house flipping, financial independence. She had a kind of hunger that was exciting to be around, especially to a man who respected drive. Their friends say she was charming and sharp, the kind of woman who could walk into a room and immediately become the most interesting person in it. She laughed easily. She dressed well. She knew what she wanted. They married in the summer of 2013, in a ceremony that their friends still remember as genuinely joyful. And for a time, maybe the first year or two, things were exactly what they appeared to be. Derek ran his business. Karen pursued real estate. They had their first son, then their second, then their third. 3 boys, ages 9, 7, and 5 at the time their father died. 3 boys who are now growing up with an aunt instead of a mother, and without the father who would have done anything for them. But somewhere in the years between the wedding and the funeral, something had gone wrong. Terribly wrong. And the trouble, as is so often the case, was money. Not the lack of it, but the mismanagement of it. The secrecy of it. Karen had begun making financial decisions that Derek did not know about. She had taken out a home equity line of credit on their family home for $250,000 and spent it without telling him. She had withdrawn at least $100,000 from joint accounts. She had accumulated what investigators would later describe as more than $2 million in personal debt, largely tied to her real estate investments that were going sideways. She was not just struggling financially. She was drowning. And Derek, the dependable, generous, trusting man who built things with his hands, had a prenuptial agreement that he signed before their marriage. That agreement was very specific. If they divorced, most of the assets stayed with Derek. The business, the equipment, the property, all of it. Karen had agreed to those terms before they said their vows. But there was one clause in that prenuptial agreement, one quiet, significant exception, that said if Derek died while they were still legally married, Karen could inherit certain assets automatically. She had studied that clause. She knew exactly what it meant. And in early 2022, roughly 10 days before Valentine's Day, Karen Mitchell began making calls. She took out 4 life insurance policies on her husband, for separate policies, totaling nearly $2 million. Derek Mitchell did not know about a single one of them. He had not signed for them. He had not approved them. He did not know they existed. And within weeks of those policies going into effect, she tried to kill him. February 14, 2022. Valentine's Day. Most couples in Cedar Ridge, Utah, were lighting candles and opening bottles of wine. In the Mitchell household, Derek and Karen sat down to dinner together, a dinner Karen had prepared. And shortly after that meal, Derek Mitchell called one of his closest friends. His voice was strained. He said he felt like something was terribly wrong. He said he felt like he was dying. He told his friend that after the dinner Karen had made for him, his body had simply collapsed, weakness, nausea, a feeling unlike anything he had ever experienced. And then, in that phone call, he said something that his friend would later repeat to investigators. He said he thought Karen was trying to poison him. Let that settle for a moment. He said it out loud. February 14th, 2022. Valentine's Day. He told his friend he thought his wife was trying to poison him. And then he survived. And then he stayed. We will come back to that. We will come back to the question of why a man who said those words to his friend did not pack a bag and leave. We will come back to the 3 boys sleeping down the hall and what that meant to a father like Derek Mitchell. But first, we need to talk about what was happening behind the scenes in the weeks between Valentine's Day and the night he died. Because Karen Mitchell did not stop. She doubled down. According to testimony that would emerge more than a year later in a Utah courtroom, Karen had already, by early February of 2022, reached out to a woman named Carmen, her housekeeper, her employee, a woman who had worked in the Mitchell home and trusted Karen enough to do favors for her. Karen had asked Carmen to help her get pills. Not ordinary pills. Not something you'd buy at a pharmacy. She had first asked for something vague, something general. And then, according to Carmen's testimony, Karen asked for something stronger. And then stronger still. She asked, Carmen testified, for what she described as the Michael Jackson stuff. The kind of drug that put you down and kept you down. Fentanyl. Street-grade fentanyl, purchased from a dealer named Robert, a man who handed off pills at a gas station in Draper, Utah, in exchanges that cell phone location data would later confirm had taken place on at least 2 occasions before Derek Mitchell died. Carmen paid $1,000 for the pills. Karen paid Carmen back. And then Karen asked again, days later. Another $1,000. More pills. And by the time Derek sat down in his bedroom on the night of March 3rd, 2022, the pills were in the house. The opportunity was everything Karen needed it to be. Here is what Karen told police about that night. She said that she and Derek had been celebrating a real estate deal she had just closed. She said she mixed him a cocktail in the kitchen, a Moscow Mule, and brought it to their bedroom, where he drank it in bed. She said he also took a THC gummy. She said that shortly afterward, she went to check on one of their sons, who was having nightmares, and fell asleep in his room. She said that when she woke up around 3:20 in the morning on March 4th, she came back to the master bedroom and found her husband dead at the foot of the bed. She said she called 911 immediately. She said she had no idea what had happened. But here is what the Mitchell children remembered about that night. One of the boys, the youngest, who was 5 at the time and is now 13, told investigators, during the investigation that followed, that his mother had put them to bed early that night. Unusually early. And without a bath, which was out of the ordinary for their family. And when he tried to go into his parents' bedroom, he said, his mother yelled at him to go away. And his mother did not sleep in his room that night. She did not fall asleep in his room, as she told the police. The child remembered. Children always remember. When paramedics arrived at the Mitchell home in the pre-dawn hours of March 4th, 2022, there was nothing they could do. Derek Mitchell was 39 years old. He was gone. The medical examiner would later determine that the fentanyl found in his bloodstream, street-grade, oral ingestion fentanyl, was present at 5 times the lethal dose. 5 times the amount required to kill a grown man. This was not a recreational overdose. This was not a tragedy of addiction. This was an execution. Quiet, domestic, intimate. Carried out in a bedroom, in a mountain town, behind a closed door, in a house with 3 children asleep down the hall. And the woman who had planned it, purchased the tools for it, and administered it, called 911, put on her performance, and waited for the world to believe her story. It almost worked. For a long time after Derek Mitchell died, Karen Mitchell was simply a widow. That was the story. That was the frame through which the community of Cedar Ridge saw her. A young mother, left alone with 3 children, navigating the kind of grief that levels a person. She accepted condolences at the funeral. She posted tributes online. She spoke about Derek with warmth and tenderness that people around her found genuinely moving. And within the year, she did something that stunned her community. She wrote a children's book. A picture book, aimed at young children, about a boy who has lost his father and wonders whether his dad can still see him during the important moments in life. The book was called Are You With Me? It was published in March of 2023, exactly 1 year after Derek's death. Karen promoted it on a morning lifestyle television show in Salt Lake City. She sat in a cheerful studio set, discussing grief and healing and how she had written the book to help her sons cope with losing their father. The producers of that television show had no idea that investigators were already building a murder case against her. Karen Mitchell had no idea how close the walls were getting. And the viewers who watched that interview, who saw a composed, articulate woman speaking with obvious love about her dead husband and her grieving children, had no idea that the woman on their screen had, according to prosecutors, poisoned that same husband twice. Once on Valentine's Day and once with a lethal dose that killed him. But the investigation had been moving forward long before the book tour. From the very first days after Derek's death, something about the circumstances had made investigators uneasy. The fentanyl finding from the medical examiner's report was not what anyone expected. Derek Mitchell had no history of drug use, not prescription painkillers, not recreational drugs, not anything. His family confirmed it. His friends confirmed it. His doctor confirmed it. And the amount of fentanyl in his system was not the amount a first-time user would take, even experimentally. It was the kind of amount that someone gives another person when they want to make absolutely certain there is no survival. Investigators began making quiet inquiries. They spoke to people in Derek's life. They spoke to family members. And what they found, in the weeks and months that followed, was a pattern that had been hiding in plain sight. Derek's family members came forward with something chilling. Derek himself had warned them. Before Valentine's Day, before the night he died, he had told people he trusted that he was afraid of his wife. He had said, in explicit terms, that if anything happened to him, they should look at Karen. His family said he stayed because of the boys. He could not bear the thought of leaving his sons or losing regular access to them through a custody arrangement. He was willing to endure a marriage he was afraid of because the alternative, walking away from his children, was something he could not accept. That information changed everything. Investigators began pulling financial records. What they found was staggering. Karen Mitchell had accumulated over $2 million in debt, largely through real estate investments that had failed or were failing. She had withdrawn money from joint accounts without Derek's knowledge. She had taken out a significant equity line on the family home without telling him. She was not just in financial trouble. She was facing a collapse. And the prenuptial agreement she had signed a decade earlier meant that if they divorced, she walked away with almost nothing. But if Derek died, while they were still married, the story was different. Very different. Investigators then discovered the insurance policies. 4 of them, totaling nearly $2 million. All taken out in the weeks before Derek died. All taken out without Derek's knowledge or documented consent. It was, as prosecutors would later describe it in court, a blueprint. A financial motive so clear and so documented that it would have been difficult to construct more damning evidence if you tried. Within weeks of those policies becoming active, she had tried to poison him on Valentine's Day. And 17 days after that failed attempt, he was dead. Investigators spoke to Carmen, the housekeeper. And Carmen, who had not realized what she had been part of, who had told Karen after Derek's death, "Please tell me those pills were not for him," and who had accepted Karen's assurance that Derek had died from a brain aneurysm. Carmen came forward and told investigators everything. She described the requests for pills. She described the escalating asks for something stronger, something more powerful. She described the cash transactions, the gas station parking lot in Draper, the way Karen had spoken about it as though it were no different from running any other errand. The investigators pulled phone records. They pulled search histories. And what they found on Karen Mitchell's phone was the kind of evidence that makes a prosecutor's hands shake with the weight of what they are holding. Her search history, recovered even after someone had attempted to delete it, included searches for: what is a lethal dose of fentanyl? What do women's prisons in Utah look like? How do investigators recover deleted messages? What does a poisoning go down as on a death certificate? And, chillingly, what is Karen Mitchell's net worth? She had been researching her own financial standing in the aftermath of her husband's death. She had been calculating. She had been planning the next chapter while the investigation into the last one was still underway. In May of 2023, more than a year after Derek Mitchell died, and just weeks after Karen appeared on morning television to promote her grief book, investigators arrested her. She was taken into custody in Cedar Ridge, Utah, charged with murder in the first degree. And the community of Cedar Ridge, the small mountain town where people left their doors unlocked, went very quiet. When Karen Mitchell's trial began in early 2026, it had been nearly 4 years since Derek had died in that bedroom. For years in which his 3 boys had grown older, in which the family business had been wound down, in which people who had known Derek Mitchell had spent a long time sitting with a grief made more unbearable by what they now knew about how he died. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Prosecutors called more than 40 witnesses to the stand. The story that emerged from those 3 weeks in a Summit County courtroom was not just the story of a murder. It was the story of a marriage that had been slowly consuming itself for years before it ended in that bedroom. Witnesses described a Karen Mitchell who had confided to friends as far back as 2019 that she felt trapped. A friend testified that Karen had told her, on a trip the two couples took together, that the prenuptial agreement had her cornered. She was afraid, she said, of what a divorce would mean for her financially. She said that Derek would be fine, that he had the business, the assets, the security, and that she would have nothing. She said she was afraid of how the community would see her. She was afraid that her boys might even prefer living with their father, given the difference in their financial situations. She felt, she said, trapped. Another witness, a close friend of Derek's who had served in the military and been deployed to Iraq, testified that shortly after Derek's death, Karen had called him and asked him, in conversation, how it had felt to take another person's life during combat. He had answered her. He had thought, at the time, that the question was simply born of grief and curiosity. He understood, in the courtroom, what it had really been. Karen had been processing something. She had been searching for absolution from someone who had already carried that weight. She had been looking for a way to normalize what she had done. Prosecutors revealed the handwritten letter that investigators had found in Karen's jail cell months after her arrest. It was 6 pages long. In it, Karen had written instructions to her brother, a set of instructions about a story she wanted him to tell her attorney. The story involved Derek supposedly asking Karen to purchase drugs for him, claiming he had an addiction she had been keeping secret to protect him. It was, prosecutors said, a fabricated alibi constructed after the fact, built to explain away the evidence of Karen purchasing fentanyl through Carmen. Karen had tried to create a new narrative, one where she was the loyal, covering wife, not the murderer. The letter was found because someone inside the jail had reported it. The defense, for their part, argued passionately. They argued that the evidence was circumstantial, that the state could not definitively prove how the fentanyl entered Derek's body, that Derek might have had a secret drug habit his family was unaware of, and that Karen had been made a scapegoat by investigators who had decided she was guilty before the evidence was in. They argued that the relationship was complicated, that the financial troubles were real, but did not prove murder, and that Karen had loved her husband. They called no witnesses of their own. They rested their case after 3 days. And when the jury walked back into that Summit County courtroom after just over 3 hours of deliberation, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty. On every count. Aggravated murder. Attempted aggravated murder for the Valentine's Day attack. Forgery. Insurance fraud. Guilty. On all of them. Karen Mitchell bowed her head when the verdict was read. The family of Derek Mitchell, his sisters, his father, the people who had carried his memory through 4 years of waiting, embraced each other in the gallery. One of his sisters stepped outside and said to the press, "Our focus now is on honoring Derek's life and supporting his boys as we all continue to heal. There are details in this case that, even now, even after the verdict, even after the sentencing, are difficult to sit with, because they speak to something deeper than guilt or innocence. They speak to the distance that can exist between who a person appears to be and who they actually are. And they force us to ask uncomfortable questions about what we owe each other, as spouses, as parents, as human beings who make promises and then have to live with what those promises cost us." Consider this. Karen Mitchell wrote a children's grief book. She wrote it about a little boy who wonders whether his dead father can still see him during the moments that matter, his first day of school, his birthday, Christmas morning. She sold that book. She appeared on television and discussed it with warmth and apparent sincerity. And the 3 boys for whom she claimed to have written it, the 3 boys who lost their father, would later, in the sentencing phase of her trial, tell the court that they did not feel safe knowing she might one day be free. One of those boys, now 13 years old, told the judge through a written statement, "I miss my dad, but I do not miss how my life used to be. I don't miss Karen. I will tell you that," he said. "With her in jail, I will be able to continue to feel safe and live a happy and successful life without fear of her hurting me or anyone I love." These are the words of a 13-year-old boy about his mother. On May 13, 2026, which would have been Derek Mitchell's 44th birthday, Judge Richard Mrazek sat in Summit County's courtroom and delivered his sentence. He noted that Karen Mitchell had tried to kill her husband once, failed, and had not changed course. She had, in the language of the court, doubled down. She had tried again 17 days later and succeeded. She had done it for money. She had done it for an inheritance and insurance payout and an escape from a financial hole she had dug herself into. The judge said, "A person convicted of committing that sequence of acts, in that way, and for that reason, a person convicted of those things is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Life in prison, without the possibility of parole." Sentenced on her husband's birthday, Karen Mitchell, in a handcuffed green jail shirt, addressed the courtroom before her sentence was handed down. She spoke to her sons. She called them her sweet baby boys. She said she had been trying to reach them for years. She said she would never be angry at them for their feelings. And then the judge sentenced her to spend the rest of her life behind bars, and she was let out of the courtroom. The three Mitchell boys are now in the care of their father's sister. They are building a life in the aftermath of something no child should ever have to survive. Their father was buried years ago. Their mother is now in a Utah state prison. And they are 13, 11, and 9 years old, carrying the weight of a story they did not ask to be part of. Derek Mitchell's family said something, in the days after sentencing, that stayed with us. They said Derek always knew. He always knew something was wrong. He warned the people he loved. He told them to look at Karen if anything ever happened to him. And he stayed, not out of denial, but out of love for those three boys. He sacrificed his own safety, in a way, because he could not bear to leave them. And in the end, it was his sons, his reason for staying, who sat in that courtroom and told a judge that they felt safer without their mother in the world. There is no clean way to hold all of that. There is no resolution that makes it less devastating. Here is what this story tells us, that the most dangerous deceptions are the ones that were the face of love. That trust, once weaponized, leaves a wound that does not heal quickly. That a man can know he is in danger and still believe, on some level, that love is worth the risk and be wrong. And that three little boys, who just wanted their father, are the ones left paying the price for a calculation they had no part in making. Was justice served in a Summit County courtroom? Yes, in the legal sense. Karen Mitchell will spend the rest of her life in prison. But Derek Mitchell will not get his 44th birthday. He will not watch his sons grow up. He will not teach them to pour concrete or build stone walls or show up when someone calls. No questions asked. He is gone, and all the verdicts in the world cannot give him back. So we leave you with this. We leave you with the question that this case, and every case like it, eventually asks us to sit with. How well do we truly know the people closest to us? And if you knew what Derek knew, if you felt what he felt, suspected what he suspected, what would you have done differently? Would you have stayed? Would you have left? Would you have been able to walk away from your own children to save your own life? There are no easy answers. There never are. But somewhere in those questions lives the full weight of what this story is really about. Derek Mitchell went home on the night of March 3, 2022, and he did not come back. Three boys grew up without their father. And a courtroom in Park City, Utah, eventually delivered a verdict that his family had been waiting 4 years to hear. But the questions this story leaves behind are not the kind that a verdict can close. We want to know what you think. When Derek told his friends that he believed his wife was trying to poison him, and then stayed, what do you think he was hoping for? Was it hope that he was wrong? Was it love for his children? Was it something else entirely? Let us know in the comments below. We read every one of them. And in a case like this, your perspective matters more than you might think. And if you thought this story was haunting, if it kept you leaning closer to the screen, if it made you think about the people you trust, wait until you hear the next story we have coming. Because in our next video, we're going to take you inside a case where a woman was slowly losing her mind, her memory, and her health. And every doctor she saw told her it was all in her head. Her family was worried. Her husband was attentive and caring and always right there by her side. And it was not until she was nearly dead that investigators discovered the truth. She was not losing her mind. She was being poisoned by the person who pretended to love her most. That story is called Everyone Thought She Was Crazy. She Was Being Poisoned. And it will be here very soon. Make sure you subscribe so you do not miss it. Because some stories The ones that live in the space between love and betrayal are the ones we carry with us longest. Thank you for watching. And thank you for staying all the way to the end. Derek Mitchell deserved to have his story told, and you honored that by being here.